I arrived at the University of Dayton at a retail establishment located across from the Pine Club that became a project for me, and I was very proud at the end to have taken it to the number one position in the Southern Ohio market, really. Our only competition for Bomb Bright, which is owned by Brock Anderson, was Jungle Gyms in Hamilton, and it was simply because of their storage space. We were pretty much one in both distributors' portfolios. For Heidelberg, they were struggling with the Milwaukee Best Tradition package at the University of Dayton, while most of the other schools had converted over to the Natural Light simply because of the price point. When I went there, I was asked by Vale Miller Jr. And Derek Brush, what do you think that we could do to capture this market? And so I said, I don't know. Let me come up with a plan and I'll get back to you. And so a few weeks passed by and I did my own research and came back and told them that the students wanted the 30 packs, and I never did bother to ask why. They wanted 30 packs, they wanted solo cups, and they wanted ping pong balls. And it was as simple as that. That's your customers. Now, some of the customers were famous for being the poster child for Gerber Baby. We had him there. He received a royalties check every month, and he would put on great big parties. I can still remember the time that Officer Weber from the University of Dayton followed him back over to Kefauver to the local place where they were going to party at the house, and then had him ID everybody. And then when they got the first ID, they had to pour out $1,100 worth of beer, which is absurd because no one should be purchasing $1,100 worth of beer. If you're on a university campus, I believe that in memory or in honor of all the dead students who have died from alcohol abuse at college campuses, on our highways, at home, and other places, we need to really pay attention to My Mothers of Mercy 3.2 Act, because there should be no packaged beer on campus. Is that a realistic goal? Not really, but you can certainly deter it by holding stores near college universities at a higher standard. And what I mean by that is each person is allowed to buy one 30-pack. Because no human being should drink more than 30 beers. I mean, they really shouldn't drink more than 12, but you got to make money somehow. And I think all that's part of being a responsible retailer and understanding those are privileged children to be going to the University of Dayton. I would also look at some things like people who are able to own properties and sell beer on campus and hold them to a higher standard as well. Because one of the worst things that can happen is for us to start overlooking these privileged children. Because they already believe they've got the inside track. And that's not enough. It's the truth. They do. But when you start allowing them to become misogynist, to become white privileged, to become racist, to become tolerant of injustices, you are beginning to destroy the fabric and foundation of these United States of America. And you know whose fault that is? That's your fault as a civil servant. It's your fault as a responsible retailer. And when you start to see the numbers and profit and loss statements from these companies that have profiteered off our young, fertile minds, you'll see why it is we ended up with Donald Trump in the White House in the first place. It's called accountability, folks. And accountability is real simple. We have a public safety department. at this university. And it's headed up by Brad Swain, Steve Durian, Amber Durian, Doug Pettigoat, Officer Weber, and a few others at this time. But when everything comes to a head, they answer to two people. They answer to the Montgomery County Courts, and they answer to Stephen Herndon, because he's over the entire student body. Any problem students have ends up going to my friend, Mr. Stephen Herndon. He is an outstanding individual. He was the support for one of my very best friends in this world. And he went through a tragedy that really moved me. And his mother went through it too, where they lost a family member who was 20 some years old. And it really makes you take a look at what's going on in society and to address it, be it writing a book about respect or simply doing it when you get up every day like it's your religion, to change people's concepts of what's right and what's wrong. So I have touched on some things about what I've seen at this university that I'm sure goes on at every other university. But I'm bitching more about the responsibility of the retailers, the system, and all the things that go on every day for our children of tomorrow. Anthony Vines is a friend of mine who worked at Dominic's for the Mantillas on the backside of Miami Valley on Main Street near Sunny Shell. And I'm sure everybody around there knows Jimmy's Cornerstone used to be the place to go. And that's where Mr. Vines and I would see each other sometimes. He also worked with my wife and did a fine job and is a fine person who allegedly made a mistake and picked up a credit card from a student. And when he went to go check it to see what was on it, he picked a beer up and bought it, and he went through, so he decided to keep the beer and got in trouble and did 1.5 years in jail. You can cite other cases out there, and I have to nauseam. You can go all the way up to the millions and millions and millions of dollars taken by Mark Hazelwood and the Flying J. But that's white-collar crime, and it's also represented better by law. You can go to a public safety associate, if you will, in Centerville, whose husband got in trouble for 82 grams of methamphetamine and a loaded handgun. And he went to Butler County and got a $4,000 fine. My friend got a $7 pack of beer and did 1.5 years. Is it because he's black and they're white? Systematically, probably, if you wanted to look at it that way. If you want to go on an individual basis, you would have to find out who the court-appointed attorney was. I mean, I would have cited those two cases and looked at the judge like, you can't be serious. He's struggling, you know. It's not hard to figure out. I would have tried a little bit harder. And I know that attorneys get upset when they have to take on all these cases, especially in Montgomery County, for the people who don't have the money for the attorney. But it's all part of a process that we've succeeded under, especially attorneys like Bob Taft, and been able to thrive under the system. And when it comes our turn to pay back in a civic-minded way, like showing up for jury duty, or if you're a lawyer doing your representation for an inmate, I think it's important to not forget the system is what made you successful in the first place. Mm-hmm. So if we start to ignore the little intricacies of the system and it starts to fail us, the best thing that we can do is look back upon the teachings of Socrates and Plato and start to look at what our function is inside the system. And you take a coach like Archie Miller at the University of Dayton, who had a recruit come in who was popular locally, but had some issues with aggressive dates, basically, is the way it was explained to me. And then a classmate of his in 2012 who had some allegations that were dropped because they didn't want the university to look bad, ended up getting my boss season tickets for participating in the overlook of these deviant behaviors of this athlete. It's a problem. I know that it's a problem everywhere, but it didn't happen under Brian Gregory, the head coach at South Florida. I didn't see any issues like that with Brian Gregory. And another thing that I knew about Brian Gregory is you could talk to him. He would talk to you. He'll sit down and talk to you. I didn't have the same relationship that I did with him, with Mr. Miller at UD. Carrying on to Oakwood. Oakwood can be a fun town because it's very introspective. It's not going to participate in a lot of the stuff that goes on outside of it. And if it does, like for instance, some UD students rented a house over there by Springhouse, and Officer Cabin shut them down immediately and sent them back across the street. And that's two different types of policing that go on. The Public Safety Department, they're police officers, but they're police officers with these sort of watchmen over them called the media and the university. So they have to operate a little bit differently. A lot of times you get taken back and dropped off to where you might have been taken to jail somewhere else. And that's all part of the privileged young fertile minds out there. So Officer Cabin may not know this story, but we had an issue once where a friend of mine named Eric Ellington went to see a concert of his. And he did it in Franklin, Ohio at Jackass Flats. And when he did, he was detoured at the door. They may not have realized that him and Walt Slade worked together at Heidelberg. But they didn't really want him in there. And I had a buddy named Matt Carnes who was there when he was telling us, and he said, next time you go, I want to go too, because I want to see what Rod does when they say this. Because he already knows. There's right and there's wrong, and there's an educated way to address something. Or you can physically impose your will. And that's the only four things that you can do as a human being. You cannot sit back and tolerate this and let it become the norm. You can't. Not even if your driver's license or your three-wheeler pulls up at game day, letting everybody know where you're from. Now, with that said, I have a program called U.S. for Hope. It's about trying to teach people that it's okay to try something different. It's okay to explore your own curiosities, if you will, and to learn by being around things that are different. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a crime if you don't allow someone to do that because you're afraid. It's pathetic. I'll give you a for instance. Soccer's foreign to me. And my friend, Yosef Tesfaye, at the University of Dayton, asked me to come over and to watch with him and his friend a soccer game. And I went over there and I watched a little bit of it at first, but since I smoke, I went outside and rudely missed what could have been a really good time for me learning some stuff about one of my foreign exchange employees. And I wish I would have, because Brittany Reed learned a lot more about Joseph than I did, because I was so caught up in what I had going on that I got blinders on in life, trying to fix stuff personally and professionally. And I missed some of the good times that I could have had, where I could have learned a little bit more of how to reach out to people uh, in the soccer community, like Joseph Tesafe, and ask him to send my messages on so that we can try to get this U.S. for Hope campaign out there before we end up with an oppressive government official again, like we did with Donald J. Trump. I hope that these things that I say are something that help people understand and try to support what I'm doing. I do get a lot of feedback from older friends of mine who tell me that they think I'm crazy. And I know what that's all about. It's called self-justification. If you're not interested in trying to teach people about how to be a better person by being more tolerant, stay in your lane. You can go to the Trump voting polls and vote for him and do all the stuff that got you to where you are in the first place. Because God knows I want to be you. Now, U.S. for Hope campaign, I'm trying to get some Olympic sponsorship. I have got about 40 government officials in Italy and France, and I'm starting to work on my Olympic mailer list for the Los Angeles Olympics in 28. I want this Private Roy Smith World War II letter to be a part of marketing campaigns, especially when it comes to alcohol, because of the reference it has in there about how he missed good alcohol, and they were all making the Jake leg, bootleg stuff, and he said, I don't drink it because it'll kill you. And it ties in a little bit with the FDA and their role in society.